persecuted by the FBI, condemned by the Department of Justice. That's the topic of today's Bold and Blunt, and I'm your host, Cheryl Chumley, giving you a Christian conservative look at today's news, politics, culture, and events. And I want to ask you, in light of the recent raid on Mar-a-Lago, Trump's own personal residence, do you think that could ever happen to you? Do you think the FBI or the Department of Justice, or both, would ever come after you, enter your home, rifle through your personal possessions, go through your clothing closets, pick up boxes and boxes of documents and possessions of yours, remove them from your home, and then claim that you were the one at fault, that you brought this on yourself because you have committed some national security offense that deems it worthy of the federal authorities to come in, enter your home, clean house, and then call it all a constitutional execution of a search warrant? Do you think that could ever happen to you? You know, whether you think about that or not, the reality is this is kind of what's going on in America. It's kind of happening right now. And before I get into that, before I talk about that, I want to give a quick shout out to edify.app. That is the online platform for faith-based podcasts. And I give a shout out to edify.app because Bold and Blunt is among its lineup of faith-based podcasts. So be sure and check out Bold and Blunt at edify.app, along with the other faith-based podcasts that are offered there. You can also get Bold and Blunt anywhere podcasts are offered. And, of course, or maybe in particular, at WashingtonTimes.com. Just go to WashingtonTimes.com, find my hyperlinked name, click on it, scroll to the bottom of one of my commentaries, and there will be some directions where you can sign up to receive Bold and Blunt, which comes out Tuesdays and Thursdays each week, right in your email box, along with the commentaries that I write almost daily at the Washington Times. There's a newsletter that the Washington Times puts out of my stuff, my commentaries and Bold and Blunt podcasts, and it comes out Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. You can sign up for it at the Washington Times. And if you already are a subscriber, thank you so much. Thank you for your support. I want to read you this headline. Just came out. This new poll from the Trafalgar Group in coordination, in partnership with Convention of States Action. And the headline on this is Trust in Department of Justice and FBI Plummets in Wake of Trump Raid. No kidding, huh? I mean, if anybody even had, after watching the politicization of the Department of Justice under Barack Obama, can you say Eric Holder? If anybody still held faith in these higher offices, these higher law enforcement officers, after 8 years of Barack Obama, that just tells me that you're not paying attention to the news. But even those who don't traditionally watch news or follow politics have to have heard about this raid on Donald Trump's own personal home in Florida. And guess what? Americans don't seem to like it. Not just Republican Americans either. Let me read more from this headline. Plurality of independents join majority of Republicans in agreeing the DOJ and FBI are corrupt and not to be trusted. Corrupt. Plurality of independents join majority of Republicans in agreeing FBI raid designed to prevent Trump from running for office. I agree. Count me as part of that majority of Republicans. Let me read from the press release a little bit. Convention of States Action in partnership with the Trafalgar Group, one of America's most accurate pollsters in 2016, 2018, 2020, and 2021, just released the results of a new national survey conducted August 19th through August 23rd of over 1,000 likely 2022 election voters. So these are the people that matter. The people that don't just sit at home and whine about what they watch on TV, but actually take their voices to the ballot boxes and vote. Mark Meckler, president of Convention of States, says this: despite the daily lies, obfuscations, denials, alternative storylines, and other attempts to throw the public off the scent, voters see what is really going on. They understand politics, not justice, are behind the unfolding saga. And they see that the more we know, the worse this gets for those who enforce so-called justice. In their fervor to go after Donald Trump, federal authorities have completely undermined their credibility and trust with a growing segment of Americans. And exactly what is that growing segment? Well, here are some takeaways from this poll. 46.6%, so 47% of American voters say the DOJ and FBI are to be respected for their pursuit of law and justice and order and yada yada. 46.2% of American voters, however, say the DOJ and FBI are too political, corrupt, and not to be trusted, while another 7.2% aren't sure. So less than half of Americans think that our federal law enforcement authorities, the ones who are supposed to be unbiased and blind to justice, blind to law enforcement, about half of American voters say they aren't. Here's some more insights, some more bullet points from this poll. 47.9%, that's about 48%, right, of independent voters say DOJ and FBI are too political, corrupt, and not to be trusted. 48% of independents. Wow, midterms, hear me roar. 68.3% of Republican voters say DOJ and FBI are too political, corrupt, and not to be trusted. Well, and this isn't really surprising. 19.9%, 20% of Democrat voters say DOJ and FBI are too political. Of course, the Democrats cheer what the Department of Justice and FBI have just done at Trump's home in Florida. They're blinded by their hatred for Donald Trump. Some more takeaways. 48.6% of American voters think DOJ's investigation into Trump is only intended to prevent him from running for office in 2024, in running for the high office, the high White House office in 2024. Whereas 48.5% of American voters don't believe that. They don't believe that the Department of Justice's investigation of Trump is only intended to prevent him for seeking a second term in the White House. And 3% aren't sure. Who are these 3%? I mean, really, it's not that hard to have an opinion about this. Either you see the raid as political, you see the Department of Justice attacks on Donald Trump, Russia collusion. Where's the Russia collusion? Oh, forget about that. We've moved on to something else now. 48.6% think the Department of Justice is attacking Trump only to keep him from running for office in 2024. 3% aren't sure. Come on now. Pick a side. And let me do one last takeaway from this. Oh, this is a good one. Americans are divided on whether the FBI and DOJ are being honest about their justification for raiding Trump's home. This is a big one, right? Because the Department of Justice and FBI have already been caught in lies in recent times, in recent years. For instance, there was that famous lie of the FISA court search warrant to go after Donald Trump. So let's not forget about that. And now here we are, put in a position of where we just have to believe the Department of Justice was acting out of national security interests, or for the good of the American people interests, or because they truly think that Donald Trump is such a nefarious criminal that he must be put behind bars type of interests. Do we believe that? Well, we don't really know. We don't really know because the federal authorities went into Trump's home when, of course, he wasn't there. And they searched around his house for 8 or 9 hours and dragged out boxes and boxes of stuff. And then it took a little while to find out exactly what they dragged out. And then, of course, we still don't really know who signed off on this search warrant. And that is crucial to understanding the motivations for starting the search warrant process in the first place. For instance, maybe the person who okayed or who requested the search warrant is a Trump hater, and we don't know that. We don't know if that in fact is true or not. I'm going to go out on a limb and say it probably is true that whoever put forward the wheels into motion to start the search warrant of Trump's home is probably not a Trump voter. I'm just going out on a limb on that. But these are the types of things that would give indicators of whether we in America need to be concerned about the politicization of our deep state, our federal law enforcement authorities. So, according to this poll, 48.7% of American voters believe the FBI and DOJ are not telling the truth about their reasons for conducting the raid on Trump's home. Whereas 48.6%, so just 0.1% less, 48.6% of American voters believe the FBI and DOJ are telling the truth about their raid, their reasons for the raid on Donald Trump's home. And once again, 2.7%, almost 3% are not sure. These 3%, just leave them out. They're not even paying attention. They must be taking advantage of the recreational marijuana shops that are nearby their home, because if they can't have an opinion on whether or not they think the raid on a former president of the United States for the first time in American history, an unprecedented raid, if they can't even have an opinion on that, then honestly, just smoke some more and stay out of politics, and please, please, please don't vote. 48.7% of American voters think the FBI and DOJ are not telling the truth. That number alone, that finding alone, is astonishing for a nation that is supposed to have a concept of justice is blind, and a nation that's supposed to have a constitutional protection of due process to the individual citizen, including former presidents of the United States that Democrats absolutely detest. Doesn't matter how you feel about Donald Trump or not. He's supposed to have the same constitutional due process rights as you and me, and therein lies the peril. Because if the Department of Justice and FBI feel that they can get by with this against Donald Trump, think what they think they can get by against you or me for far lesser perceived fabricated offenses. Donald Trump has a heck of a platform, and he has many, many, many supporters. Your average Jane and Joe citizen may not have that type of platform. And with 87,000 new IRS agents just raring to go, thank you, Joe Biden, who's to say what's coming down the pike of federal overreaches into areas that should be protected, not just by the Constitution, but by the concept of God-given individual liberties. Well, I have a guest today who knows exactly what it's like to be put under the gun of the federal authorities, the federal deep state authorities. He has a new book out. His name is Paul Manafort, and you probably remember his name as tied to Donald Trump, which is, in the eyes of the left-leaning federal law enforcement authorities working for Joe Biden, just about enough to make him guilty. Guilty of what? Doesn't matter. He's guilty. He's tied to Donald Trump. He's a deplorable. He's one of those dastardly conservatives. Doesn't matter if he's committed any offense or not. They'll find one. And find one, and more than one, they did. Paul Manafort, I want to thank you so much for being on Bold and Blunt. I appreciate your time.
My pleasure to be with you today.
Congratulations on your new book, Political Prisoner, Persecuted, Prosecuted, but Not Silenced. What do you want people to know about you that they haven't learned in the last few years?
Well, everything they've learned in the last few years is wrong, so I'd like them to learn who I really am. That's why I wrote the book. Basically, the Weissman and the special counsel had a whole strategy, which was to shut me off from media and then leak things into the media and define me and convict me in the court of public opinion before I ever came to trial. And it's that smear job, my inability to respond, really gave a very false impression of who I am and what I've done in my life. This book is meant to address that. It goes through a lot of, really the last 7 years, but a lot of the issues that are current today. It talks about the deep state and the danger that it's presenting, not just to people who support Trump, but to all Americans.
Right.
We're all at risk now. We're seeing this in the Biden administration's continuing to weaponize the law enforcement system. It talks about the two-tiered system of justice, where if you're a Democrat, you can do anything you want. If you're a Republican, you don't have to do anything, and you're in danger. And then it gets into a lot of what part of the Trump campaign and presidency, 2016. I exposed the Russian collusion narrative. We talk about its genesis, the Mueller investigation, why they came after me so hard. They weren't interested in me, but they thought that if they got me into a tough place, that they tried to put it in solitary confinement for 9 months, actually 11 months. I think about it. But it failed. They wanted me to give up Donald Trump. I wouldn't do it. I talk about that.
Let me
talk about. Go on.
I'm looking at your chapters right now, your chapter titles, and you do get into some real specifics. And the one question that I know probably is going to be on most people's minds is there are a lot of conservatives that saw that you were being persecuted, just as you explained, that it was a political attempt to take down Donald Trump and so forth. But why did you plead guilty, and why did you accept some of the charges that the government put on you?
Well, that was I plead guilty to the second trial. I couldn't get a fair trial, and I go into great detail on this in the book. I pled guilty, but because there are three things going on at that time. One, I had just had a trial in Virginia, which I had been able to beat them back on most of the charges, but was convicted on several. But it was a 4-week trial. My next trial was starting within 2 weeks. There was no way I was going to get a fair jury, and I talk about this in the book. During our voir dire, most voir dires are picking a jury will have 30 people that they'll talk to, interview in order to get 12 jurors and 3 or 4 alternates. We had 120 jurors that we had a questionnaire, and then we were able to construct. One person passed our test and possibly be an objective. Over 90 said they could not be objective on me or Trump. Another 20 were just lying through their teeth, and we could tell in the questionnaire. So I knew I wasn't going to get a fair trial. Number 2, Weissman had included in the forfeiture assets that he wanted to come after me, assets of my children. And it was why? Because she was trying to put pressure on me. And so I wanted to get those assets taken out of the forfeiture list, knowing I couldn't get a fair trial, in knowing that whatever assets were in the forfeiture list, I'd probably lose. And 3, we were moving into a general election, a by-election, and I wanted to get me out of the politics. I go through the details on all of those points in the book, but I didn't plead guilty to turn on Trump. I pleaded guilty to not do a trial. And in the book, I go through in great detail what Weissman was trying to get me to say about Trump and about the Trump campaign, and the traps that he set for me, and how I was able to expose them and not fall for them, and how I created a record that not only didn't incriminate Trump, but exonerated Trump. Because all I had to do was tell the truth and get it onto the record, which I did.
I wonder if you can tell people a little bit of what it feels like to be placed under the big government gun, the big government scrutiny and persecution. Because I recall when K.T. McFarland was experiencing some level of persecution from the government herself, and she was surprised. She thought that she was a Girl Scout and she had nothing to hide and nothing to fear, and yet at the end of that day, she was exhausted, fatigued, and completely frustrated with how the deep state in government attacks individual citizens. What's it feel like to have Mueller breathing down your neck?
Yeah, well, it's certainly no fun. It's certainly no fun when he's breathing down your neck and he's stuck you in an 8x12 cell with no windows and no light and no awareness of when you're going to get out. But I understood the game Weissman was doing. And I didn't really have a choice of, okay, I don't want to play anymore. And so I had to just focus on what the Mueller investigation was trying to accomplish, make sure I didn't fall prey to any of their tricks, and keep my resolve strong. And I relied on my faith and my family for that, and it worked. It got me through that very tough time. But it's daunting when you know you're innocent, and yet all of these resources are coming out. And hindsight is 20/20. But back in the aftermath of the election in 2016, I thought it would be all over. I thought, okay, now they wanted to go at Trump. They failed. Now we move on. The campaign's behind us. But it never stopped. And it wasn't until really April that I realized this is a long game. We're not even in the early innings of it. And I didn't know what to do in this other than to just be strong, because the resources just kept, every time I turned around, there was something else popping up, another story here, something in the UK, Daily Guardian, something in the Daily Mail, something in a paper in France, and using the same words as the papers here in the United States. And so that's what made me realize this was a deep state game. It was not justice trying to investigate wrong theories. It was a narrative that they were building to convict me, which in the end they did, but they didn't get what they wanted because they didn't give them what they really wanted.
And let's talk about the role of the media here, because we're watching, and a few minutes ago you brought up what's taking place right now with the deep state and Donald Trump a little bit. The role of the media to just bring forth charges and keep accusations alive, absent any sort of proof. You certainly were swept up in that, but we're seeing that take place right now with Donald Trump fighting to get the Justice Department to release the affidavit, which is like saying you have the right to face your accusers. Could you comment on what's taking place right now and the similarities between what you suffered?
Yeah, well, what's taking place right now, unfortunately, is exactly the same thing at a higher level. I mean, the media has this game they play, but it's not the media. It's the deep state, with the media being a part of it. And the game they play is to throw out, a big issue. I mean, Trump may be guilty of committing espionage. Donald Trump is not guilty of committing espionage. But they throw that big thing out there. And then anonymous government sources leak to the favorite media sources, which, by the way, in the last week, are the same media sources that they leaked to during the Russian conspiracy hoax. They're literally the same people. And they build on the story using code words. And then the code words get picked up by the Twitter world. And all of a sudden, you've got this circular reporting off of an absurd, vacuous statement. But now it's said as fact, and then the New York Times and the Washington Post start talking about what the Espionage Act is, as if that's really what he's at risk about committing a crime. And the picture gets built, and I call it conviction in the court of public opinion, because that's their whole game, is to convict you in the court of public opinion. Then if they bring the case like they did against me, the work is done. And then when you throw a gag order on me on top of it and stick me in solitary confinement, it's impossible. With Donald Trump, the game is to make sure he doesn't run for election. Well, he's going to run. If he decides to run, he's going to run. None of this is going to stop him. The Constitution does not say if he violated the Espionage Act, he can't run for president. It doesn't say that. And there's no way, if he decides he wants to run, that he won't. And so the game is going to backfire on the Democrats and the left. But it's the if you will, one shining part about it all is it's so outrageous that the people don't believe it. I mean, the media has now dropped below Congress in trust.
Yes.
Within it.
Yep.
I mean, which means that nobody is paying attention to these stories for news. Maybe for entertainment because they hate Donald Trump. Maybe be angry because they like Donald Trump. But they're not crediting the stories with truth. And so it wears down and erodes our democracy. That's what the risk is.
I think you.
That's what I talk about in my book.
I think you nail it, both here and most likely in more specifics in your book, Political Prisoner, Persecuted, Prosecuted, but Not Silenced. And I just wonder if you could, given the dark times that we're living in right now, the realities of what you went through and the realities of what Donald Trump is now going through, any conservative out there, especially any Trump supporting conservative, could face a similar type big government deep state attack. Having lived through it yourself, do you have any words of advice for other conservatives out there, especially now with the 87,000 IRS agents who are about to be hired? Do you have any words of advice how to protect yourself?
The way we deal with this is we've got to get these people out of office. We've got to make sure that the tsunami that looks like it's coming in November happens, and then we've got to open, air out the corruption that is existing. They have to use the power of the committees to expose the hypocrisy and the crimes and the abuse of our justice system, not to get even, but to protect our Constitution. Because if we don't do that, then we will allow the woke left to further entrench themselves, and we can't do that. So this November is very important. The first step is taking back the Congress. The next step is taking back the White House. And in between that, we need to investigate in the openness of public hearings the corruption that's going on still in the FBI and the Department of Justice and in the White House. And then when we win in 24, we've got to finish the job that Trump started and wipe out, without any concern, all those who are dedicated to destroying our country, not building it.
And I hope people pick up a copy of your book, Political Prisoner, because it's eye-opening and it will adequately inform American citizens about the behind-the-scenes deep state level of attacks that citizens in our country are suffering on a daily basis, it seems like. Paul Manafort, congratulations once again on the book, and I really want to thank you for taking the time to speak with me.
Thank you very much. I look forward to talking to you again soon.
Bye now. Tread carefully, America. Tread very carefully, American citizens. If you think the persecution by federal authorities of you yourself could not occur in America, think again. We are living in dangerous times, in perilous times. And you know what? Even the Bible tells us that these times are coming. They will put you out of the synagogue. In fact, the time is coming when anyone who kills you will think they are offering a service to God. That is John 16:2. Check it out. This is the path that we are on, not just in America, in the world. But if you're an American citizen and you think the Constitution is going to protect you against federal overreaches or targeted attacks on your character by federal authorities or unjust criminal or even civil prosecutions, think again. Think again. Look, Republicans are no saints, but Democrats will stop at nothing to tear down America's foundation. I want to thank you for listening. Remind you that if you like Bold and Blunt, you can get Bold and Blunt at edify.app or at WashingtonTimes.com, or, of course, wherever podcasts are offered. And one quick note, if you want to learn more about how the federal government seizes individual liberties, individual God-given liberties, by the way, and does so by working in partnership with global entities who hate America and want to crumble America as quickly as possible, using this puppet president called Joe Biden, while they can, check out my latest book, Lock Down: The Socialist Plan to Take Away Your Freedom. It's available at Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, Amazon, or on my own website, CherylChumley.com. Thank you so much for listening. Tune in next time. And in the meanwhile, stay blunt, stay bold.